Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fourth virtual workshop. As always, it is our pleasure to provide election information to you, our Maricopa County voters. My name is Betty Galanter, and I'm the Voter Outreach Manager for the Elections Department. Now, today, we are going to dive into the tabulation process, its security and accuracy, and providing information on when election results are posted and what are the processes involved to post those final election results. Now, as I mentioned, this is our fourth virtual workshop. So if you've missed any of our first three or our webinars, you can still view them anytime by going to youtube.com/Maricopa Vote. Now there you can view all of our virtual events, our video shorts. We've got our 10-minute or so election connection video shorts hosted by our co-elections directors, Scott Jarrett and Ray Valenzuela, who answer questions from voters like you. And we also have our very own Fill the Ballot video series on various election topics, which run about 1 to 2 minutes. So again, you can tap into those anytime by going to youtube.com/Maricopa Vote. Now, today's agenda, we've got a lot of great information to share with you. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session, but you don't have to wait until the end of the presentation because you can enter your questions anytime via chat. Just select the chat function, type out your question, and click submit. We're going to try to answer as many questions as possible during our time together. And you are in for a great treat today. As our host is Scott Jarrett. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with Scott. He is one of our elections director, and he is responsible for all the in-person voting and tabulation operations. He's been with the election department for over 3 years, and I am in awe of the wealth of his knowledge in directing and leading our department operations and implementing strategic direction, conducting our elections. He works closely with the county recorder, and he reports to the Board of Supervisors. But before we begin, I want to just talk about a couple of notes. We are recording this workshop. We will upload it to YouTube for future viewing in about a week. To maximize our presentation, please keep your cameras off and your mics on mute. And we are providing cart captioning by Tracy, and we have 2 American Sign Language interpreters today, Kelly and Dustin. So I do want to welcome Tracy, Kelly, and Dustin. So with that, let's get started, and I will turn it over to Scott.
Great. Thank you, Betty. And I like the encouragement where you said answer as many questions as possible. So that's my cue to try to keep it short so we can answer all those questions. So the first slide here, we have just some key dates. We usually provide this in all of our presentations. We have modified this slide slightly so that it has some tabulation specific dates. And as looking at this, I see that some of those tabulation specific dates have already occurred. And that first one was actually on October 11th. It was the voter registration deadline for the November general election, but also happened to be our logic and accuracy test day. So we are walking around in the tabulation center saying happy LNA day. And that's when the Secretary of State and the county performed our logic and accuracy tests on our equipment to certify the equipment for use in this upcoming election. And we'll be talking about the logic and accuracy tests in a little bit more specific details later. On October 24th, that is another big day for us in Maricopa County when we will actually begin tabulating all those early ballots that we received to date. So that's next Monday, so a little bit less than a week away, and we'll start counting those ballots. The one thing that people, or a common question I get is when we do start counting, how do we, are we snooping or peeking at those results? And that's absolutely not the case. We as election officials, we're counting those ballots, but we don't run the report to release those results until right before we're going to post them at 8 p.m. on election night. A good reminder for voters, October 28th, that's the last day to request a ballot. November 1st would be the last day. If you are in possession of one of those early ballots, that's the last day to mail that back. Then we do have election day, that's November 8th. And our first results will be posted at 8 p.m. on election night. And that deadline or timeline is established in state law. And then we will be posting results throughout the evening on election night. Those will be results coming back from our voting locations. And then we'll have daily posts thereafter until we're completely wrapped up. Our goal is to have 98 to 99% of all of our results reported within the first 72 hours of election day. And then the complete results and final results posted within 10 to 12 days. And later in this presentation, we'll actually go through and talk about why does it take that amount of time for us to finalize those results. Can we go to the next slide? So one of the things that we do as election officials to prepare for an election is we do forecast turnout. And the reasons we do it is very different than what the media stations or even the candidates are doing to forecast turnout. We're doing it to make sure that we have enough resources to support an election. So for this upcoming election, we're anticipating there to be between 1.4 and 1.9 million voters that participate in the election. And the reason we have this wide range is because really elections are very specific. The reasons why voters will participate is unique to that election. There could be a very popular candidate on the ballot, a very controversial ballot measure that drive turnout to be high or maybe even low. So we just look to history to sort of tell us how many people will be participating. So we went back all the way to 1946, looked at similar type elections, those midterm elections, gubernatorial elections. We also looked at recent elections, presidential years from 2020 and 2016 to give us an idea of how many voters might be participating. And that helps us make sure that we have enough vote centers out to serve those voters and enough temporary workers hired to work at our central count facility. Another thing is if you are on the mode in which you choose to vote. So whether you're voting by mail or early, or whether you're choosing to vote on election day, you might see a slightly different tabulation process. And so those early ballots, those will go through our central count tabulation process. On election day, we'll have a voting location tabulator. Can we go to that next slide? So these are some of those tabulators. Now I mentioned a slightly different process, but really all of our equipment is from the same manufacturer and all of it goes through federal certification as well as state certification before we're able to use it according to state law. And that federal certification process is a very robust set of tests related to security, reliability, and accuracy. One of the requirements is that they test millions and millions of ovals when they're doing their accuracy test, and that equipment cannot fail more than one of those ovals. And the reason they even have an allowance for one of those ovals and millions of ballots cast is because when you're counting paper ballots, the tabulation equipment can build up some dust onto that equipment, and then that could cause that tabulator to do a little bit of a misread on that. However, here in the elections department, between all of our shifts, we are cleaning our equipment frequently to remove that dust. So we expect that our tabulation equipment could be 100% accurate. And that's been proven over and over again through hand counts here in Maricopa County. So that first piece of equipment there on the very left-hand side of your screen, that central count tabulator, we call that a high pro. And it can count upwards, at least from the manufacturer, 6,000 to 8,000 ballots per hour. You know, if we have any of our tabulation members on monitoring this, they're cringing a little but when I say that, because they can run 6,000 to 8,000 ballots per hour. However, because we do a lot of tracking and chain of custody documents, and we only run ballots in batches of 200, because of all of that tracking documentation, really the tabulation equipment runs about anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 ballots per hour. So significantly less, but it's because we're adding controls into the process that track every ballot that's going through, and then we can tie those ballots that go through central count right back to those bipartisan early processing boards that process that ballot, separating it from the envelope, creating that secret ballot. Other equipment we see on the screen here is our adjudication stations. So those, and why would we even need adjudication stations? And those are also within our central count tabulation center, all in that secure room. And the reason we would need those is, right, our tabulators can't read handwriting. So we just passed the write-in candidate filing deadline. That was September 29th. And so if a voter chooses to write in a candidate's name, we need to send that to a bipartisan adjudication board, a Republican and a Democrat, to review that ballot to see who they actually voted for. We can program the equipment with those official write-ins, and then they can award that vote. Every time they're doing that, they're creating a manual tracking log. Then we generate a system-generated log before we feed those results into our tally reporting system. And they do that comparison between their manual log and that system-generated log to make sure that the information was read into the equipment accurately. Another reason why we look at our ballots may go to adjudication is a completely blank ballot. Before I got into the elections world, I would have said, why would a voter ever submit a completely blank ballot? But in fact, they do. But sometimes they may vote right using circles, and they circle the ovals instead of filling in the ovals. And that's our opportunity to have those Republican, Democrat board members to look to see, did this voter truly return a completely blank ballot, or can we determine their intent and they were circling those ovals? Again, when they do that, we create a complete manual log from those bipartisan boards, and then that all gets read into the system, and then that log gets compared to the system generated log. Other items on this screen are our accessible voting device. So and these would be items that are, if you're going to one of our in-person voting centers, whether it's on early voting or election day, if a voter has a disability and they need the assistance and they want to vote their ballot autonomously or by themselves, they can use this accessible voting device. This will allow a voter with a visual impairment, a hearing impairment, or maybe a mobility impairment to be able to vote by themselves. It is a touch screen, or they can use an audio tactical device to be able to progress through the ballot, or they can use headphones and listen to our audio files as they vote the ballot. Now, the one thing to note with this is, even though they're using this device, it does actually print out a ballot. So this is a ballot marking device. And then there's that paper ballot that voter can verify. Yep, I voted every one of those contests. And that then would get fed into this during early voting. I'll go to one of our central count tabulators. It's election day, one of our election day tabulators. And that brings us to that final image on the screen. That's one of our precinct-based tabulators. So if you're voting on election day, you'll be feeding your ballot into that precinct-based tabulator. And right there, you'll see a little check mark when you feed your ballot in, telling you your vote counted. And we'll go into more detail about the controls over all of these tabulators. Can we go to the next slide? So in early voting, there's many different controls that occur even before the ballots get to our tabulation center. First is when we're mailing out ballots, and we have currently 1.9 million of our voters on the active early voting list, or if you're doing a one-time request, we'll end up mailing that ballot. But we do make sure that you're registered to vote before we mail that ballot. And those checks include us going up to vital statistics, making sure that you really are a human being, us sending out official mail, whether that's your voter registration card, exactly to your house to make sure that you as a voter live at that address. But then when those ballots come back to us, we'll go through and do a 100% signature verification process. And that even has many different audits over it as well, or different levels of review. Managers reviews, audits before we're accepting those ballots and putting them through the next stages of the process. But the other piece to this is transparency is very, very important to us. And we want you to play an active role. And one way that you can be active in participating in this is signing up to offer our text messaging or our mail service to be alerted when we're mailing you that ballot and when we're getting it back. And the one way that we're able to do that is the secure barcode tracking. So if you can see on this green affidavit envelope on the screen, there's a barcode that's unique to every single voter. And this is one of the ways that we're able to make sure that we only count one ballot per voter. Right? There may be instances where a voter needs to replace their ballot or they've damaged their ballot and they need a new one. Well, it's using this barcode that we can cancel that first ballot and send you that second. It's also what will allow, if you are an early ballot recipient, receive that ballot in through the mail, and then you decide to go vote in person. We can verify that you haven't returned that first ballot, and we can give you a live ballot to vote in person, whether that's during early voting on election day. But you can sign up to track your ballot using our text message service. Currently, we have about less than 200,000 voters signed up for this service, and would like to get this to be every single voter in Maricopa County. This is going to tell you when we've mailed out that ballot, when we received it. I know that I received the text message at 7 a.m. in the morning last Wednesday telling me my ballot was sent. I received that ballot on Saturday. It was a little damp because of the rain on Saturday, so I let it dry overnight. Then I went to my couch, which at our last press conference last week, Ray Valenzuela, the co-director of the elections department, said we have a new voting location, which can be your couch. So I decided to, okay, I'm going to take him up on that offer, fill out my ballot on my couch, seal it back in. I brought it in on Monday. I was alerted on Tuesday that the Maricopa County Elections Department had received my ballot. And then this morning I was alerted that my signature was actually verified and was going to be tabulated starting on October 24th. So a great service, and if we can get you to sign up for that. Can we go to the next slide? So there's lots of different ways that we're tracking your ballot. I mentioned the unique barcode that's on the affidavit envelopes, but we're also creating lots and lots of chain of custody documents as well. That'll track that process as soon as we get it in hand. Everything from if you're dropping off your ballot or voting in person early, that's going to go into an affidavit envelope. That affidavit envelope is going to go into one of our early ballot drop boxes. We're going to send out a bipartisan team, a Republican and Democrat, to go out to that site. They're going to meet with the inspector, show their ID. They're going to open up that ballot drop box together. They're going to pull out those ballots that are in those affidavit envelopes. They're going to unlock it. They're going to log all their tamper evidence seal numbers on all of that chain of custody documentation. They're going to bring all of that back in transport containers that have tamper evidence seals on them. They'll get back to the elections department. They'll break those seals. They'll log all of that information. They'll do audits, counting the number of ballots, and then they'll send that into our vault to be stored overnight. And then we'll have another team that will take it over to be scanned in and then into the next stage of that process. So the point is, every step of the process we can track, and we have chain of custody documents tracking that process. And here you can just see a few of those items on the screen. We also do all of our work in bipartisan teams. I mentioned those Republican, Democrat, those are courier teams going out to the early voting locations. But even when we're separating that ballot from the affidavit envelope, creating that secret ballot, they're doing it in bipartisan teams, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians, all working together. We also have observers playing a critical role. They're monitoring every step of this process. We have them at our early voting locations, our vote centers on election day, as well as in our signature verification room and our ballot processing rooms and our tabulation rooms as well. And then when we're bringing back ballots on election night, we have escorts from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. So a lot of security over the entire process. And then can we go to the next slide? And I can talk about security and security for hours. However, Phil, our mascot, can do it in about 2 minutes and probably do a much better job than I can. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him for the next couple minutes. So Betty, can you hit play?
Hey everyone, Phil the Ballot here.
In Arizona, voters use paper ballots to cast their votes. The tabulators are the machines that the Maricopa County Elections Department uses to count those ballots. Before and after every election, our tabulation equipment is tested to make sure your vote is accurately counted. After the election, political parties also do a hand count audit of the results. These are the machines that count early and vetted provisional ballots. And these are the machines you see at the voting locations that count election day ballots. None of the tabulation equipment is connected to the internet. You can see the visible wires here that show the tabulation equipment at our headquarters is routed directly to a secure server, not the internet. This secure server is where results are stored. It's behind glass and on display for the public to view. Anyone can log on to maricopa.vote to watch as our team counts ballots. The cameras stream live 24/7. Access to this room is restricted, and only those with a direct job or oversight of tabulation can access the room. While ballots are being counted, political party representatives and observers are watching. If you're voting in person on election day, you'll see when your ballot is counted. These machines only accept election day ballots and cannot read early ballots or provisional ballots. There are security measures in place, including tamper-proof seals, encrypted memory cards, and locks that keep your vote safe and secure.
Learn more at BeBallotReady.vote. See you there.
Thank you, Phil. That's a great reminder of all the different security we have over our tabulation equipment. I just wanted to emphasize a few items. Phil mentioned that we have live camera feeds within the entire election process, at least even over our tabulation center, but we also have them in our early ballot processing rooms. We have them monitoring our drop boxes. We have 2 outside drop boxes, one here at the elections department, one at our Mesa facility. So lots of different ways that we are being transparent, and so voters can get insight into the processes as well. A few other items that we've added to our equipment, we've created for every single one of our USB ports or the ports on our equipment, we've identified unique serialized number of port blockers that we are the only ones that have the key. So we've put those port blockers into all those devices to add one layer of security. For our equipment in our tabulation center, we've put our computers within security canisters. So, and those are locked where we only have the access to those keys. Just one other measure that we're taking to secure that equipment, even though it's in a very secure room. That secure room is restricted by badge access. We always require 2 individuals to enter that room together. And that's 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Again, all of it's under live video streaming. And then also all of our equipment has anywhere from 2 to 3 different layers of authentication or passwords. So if you're in our central count facility, you're going to need 2 different passwords to get into our equipment. You're also going to need a security key. That's going to be the same thing with any one of our vote center tabulators as well that will be used on election day. Our poll workers will have to enter in a unique password that's specific to that election, as well as use that security key to get into that tabulator. Can we go to the next slide? So here we are on election day. So this is the tabulator that if you're voting at one of our vote centers on election day, you'll be able to feed your ballot directly into this tabulator. There's many different security measures that we implement for our precinct-based tabulators, our vote center tabulators. First, it starts with that logic and accuracy test, making sure that it's programmed to accurately tabulate that ballot. After we've confirmed that it is accurate and programmed correctly, we're going to go ahead and fix it with tamper evident, or we're going to use these memory cards. And you can see in this slide that's here in the middle, that's all those memory cards coming back on election night from the August primary. Those memory cards are encrypted and they have to be programmed together within our ballot tabulation center. So if those cards are not programmed simultaneously together in our tabulation center, our precinct-based tabulator will not work at all. Essentially, it will turn into a brick. So we will insert those and has to have 2 of those memory cards in that tabulator. We will then affix this tabulator with tamper evident seals that then we ask our poll workers on what we call a precinct ballot report. That's one of those chain of custody documents to verify that those tamper evident seals are the exact same ones that we sent out to that voting location that we affixed right after that logic and accuracy test. Another security measure taken is we'll have our poll workers, and they will be members of different parties working together to verify that there's no actual ballots that have been run through that tabulator when they're first opening those polls. So the touch screen will tell them that there's 0 ballots that have been run through. They'll also then run what we call a 0 report. So there's like a little tape register that's attached to this. It prints out a report and it goes through every single contest on the ballot, making sure that there's zeros. There's been no ballots tabulated, no votes counted on the machine. Once the poll workers verify that, then they'll go ahead and open the polls, and that's what makes it ready for voters then to be able to cast their ballots. And then there'll be a very similar process that occurs when we close the polls. So after every voter has gone through and voted on election day, we'll go through closing the polls process. Our poll workers will then determine, okay, how many votes were counted. They'll add that information onto that precinct ballot report. They'll actually then ready those memory cards for being returned to the election department, so then we can report results. They'll break one of those tamper evident seals. All of that information gets logged. Actually take a copy of that, or take that tamper evident seal, fix it to the back of that precinct ballot report, and then all of that will be transported along with the paper ballots that are in that blue ballot box, in a black canvas bag that's affixed with tamper-evident seals. All of those will either come directly to the elections department, again, Republicans and Democrats working together, or to one of our very secure receiving sites that we have sheriff's deputies as well as bipartisan teams accepting and readying that equipment. They'll all have chain of custody documents that they're completing along the way as well. Can we go to the next slide? So all of that will end up coming back to the elections department so we can report results. But one of the other items that will be coming back is, and this is allowed for in state law, and it's one of the ways that we provide access to all voters, is if a voter has received their early ballot, they can drop it up all the way up until 7 p.m. on election night. In the August primary, we had 122,000 ballots dropped off, or early ballots dropped off on election night. In the August primary for 2020 is about 75,000. So that was a significant increase. When we look back to the November 2020 general election, we had about 175,000 total early ballots dropped off on election night. And so if we have that similar type increase for this upcoming November general election in 2022, we could be looking at anywhere from 220 to 280,000 early ballots dropped off on election night. Well, this is one of the reasons why it does take us a little while to be able to post results and all those final results, because every one of those ballots has to go through a very thorough vetting process, right? So chain of custody all the way back from the voting locations to the elections department. Then we need to go through and do a signature verification on every single one of those. That will take us a few days to get through that process. Then those ballots have to go to an early ballot processing board where they separate that ballot from the envelope, creating that secret ballot. All of that takes a little bit of time. Again, we're creating more chain of custody records as they go through that process. And then ultimately they end up in our tabulation center where we can run them through our tabulation equipment. So this is one of those main reasons why we don't have 99% of our ballots reported on election night, why we anticipate we'll have anywhere from 98 to 99% of them reported within 72 hours of election day. We go to the next slide. So this is showing actually from our August primary, we had a lot of questions about why does it take so long to tabulate ballots and release those results? And I just explained one of those reasons, which is all those early ballots that are coming in from election night. But there's a few other factors as well. And this slide actually is showing our historical, the number of days that we've been able to release our final results. But there has been, over the last few years, a new law that allowed for voters, if we question their signature, or if they didn't provide sufficient ID at the voting location, those voters can cure that issue. So if we've questioned their signature, they have 5 business days, which is 7 calendar days. Actually, in this election, it's 8 because we have the Veterans Holiday. So they'll have 8 calendar days to be able to cure that ballot. And again, if you've signed up for our text messaging service and we've questioned your signature, you'll be alerted that we've questioned your signature. But we're going to go through, those voters have those 8 days. So to be able to cure that signature, if they didn't provide sufficient ID at the voting location, they have that opportunity to be able to then go to any one of the city or town clerk's offices or here at the elections department to bring in that ID so their ballot can be tabulated. So during the August primary, on average, it takes us about 8 days or 8.22 days for us to be able to get through all those official results. We actually reported results in 8 days. We also were one of the second fastest times ever on election night, bringing those ballots in and being able to report them. We did it by 12:40. One of the reasons is because we're bringing in all those ballots from those voting locations. Voters might show up to vote right at 7 p.m. If there's a line, there could be a 20-30 minute line. Those voters will then be able to complete their ballot. Sometimes their ballots might take 10 or 15 minutes to complete. For this election, we do have a very long ballot. It's one of the longest ballots we've had in Maricopa County history. On average, voters will be presented with 80 contests to vote. Some of our voting precincts, I think Sheffield precinct and Mesa has 87 contests that they'll be voting. So that could take upwards of 15 or 20 minutes for a voter to complete. So then those poll workers won't even be able to begin breaking down that voting location till close to 8 p.m. or a little bit after. They've got to do all the paperwork, those security checks, start completing those chain of custody documents. So that's why it could take us till well after midnight to complete and report those final results. In the last two elections, 2020 and 2018, our final posting was a little after 2 p.m. So I could expect something similar for this upcoming election as well. Can we go to the next slide? So this is showing a very similar graph, but using general elections. So on average, it's taken us about 12.5 days to be able to report those final results. This has two different axes, this graph. The one on the left is showing the number of ballots as it's been increasing in Maricopa County. So you can see in 2006, it was just under 1 million, and it's progressively, and it's based on presidential versus midterm elections, sort of goes higher, then drops back down again. But if you used a trend line, it's every single year, it's progressively getting a little bit more and more and more, upwards to 2 million that we had in 2020. And then the bar chart or the graph is showing the number of days for us to report final results. That's actually been getting lower and lower every single year. And that is a testament to our tabulation equipment, how reliable, quick, fast, and accurate it is. It's allowed us to be be able to report those results a little bit quicker throughout the process, as well as make sure that they're accurate and reliable. This also shows that no signature curing was occurring all the way from 2006 to 2016. In 2018 is when those voters were afforded that opportunity to cure that signature. And again, this year it will be 8 days after election day. So in 2020, it took us 10 days. We're anticipating anywhere from 10 to 12 days for this general election before we'll have those final results posted as well. So if we can go to the next slide. But tabulation is not done right after we've posted those final results. There's one other piece that's occurring, and this is the hand count. And this is one other security measure that's over the process, making sure that our tabulation equipment is accurate. And now this is not done by the Maricopa County Elections Department. We help facilitate it, but this is an activity that's done by the political parties themselves. So this photo is actually showing the August primary. The county chairs from the Libertarian Party, the Democratic Party, and the Republican Party randomly draw the ballots that they've selected. So during tabulation, we'll have observers there every single day, verifying and observing our process of tabulation, and also selecting the potential ballots that would be randomly drawn at this meeting, that then they will have their appointees go through and hand count to verify those ballots match our tabulation results. So in the 2020 general election is just over 8,000 total ballots that went through this hand count process. It's 47,000 different contests, and it matched perfectly. I expect that there would be about a similar number of ballots that go through this hand count process for the 2022 general election as well. And we don't just do the ballots that go through central count. We randomly draw ballots that are from our vote centers as well. And there has been questions about whether you do the hand count for at the precinct level or the vote center. And one of the advantages to the vote centers is it's not specific to one precinct. It actually broadens the sampling of ballots that are included, because any voter can vote at any single one of those precincts. So there will be much more precincts included in this hand count. And also you can, just like we did in the August primary, the City of Surprise, or the voting location at the City of Surprise Town Hall, our City Hall, was selected, and there were well over 1,000 ballots within that precinct. So it does create the opportunity to have many more ballots included in the hand count. So can we go to the next slide? So in the last legislative session, there was a change that's going to impact the release of results and really the prevalence of a recount. So prior to this election cycle, the automatic recount was triggered when there was 0.1% difference between the winner and loser of the contest. So now that percent has increased to a full 0.5%. And really, it was 0.1% or for a presidential or federal contest, or 200 ballots, whichever was less. Now it's 0.5%, and there isn't that number of ballots or whichever is less. So that 0.5% will So for example, if we have 3 million ballots statewide in the governor's contest, a 0.5% would be about 15,000 ballots. So if there's a difference between the winner and the loser of about 15,000 ballots, then that will trigger what is called an automatic recount. And that is not something that the candidates need to request. That's not something that just a member of the public can request. This is the filing officer needs to then, they'll recognize, okay, it's within this 0.5% threshold. They need to go to court and file with the court. So if it's at a federal, state, or legislative contest, it's the filing officer is the Secretary of State. If it is a local contest, the filing officer is the Maricopa County Elections Department. Or if it's in one of the other counties, the Elections Department in that county. Can we go to the next slide? So this is very similar to the calendar that we showed initially, but what we're projecting for the recount process in Maricopa County. So it starts with election day. We'll have final results posted on the 17th or the 20th. The last day for the county to canvass is on November 28th. That's the Monday after Thanksgiving. And then 1 week later, the Secretary of State, or nearly 1 week later, that's a Monday, December 5th, the Secretary of State will canvass. And that's what will trigger a potential automatic recount from occurring. And we do anticipate that in this election, we'll have several contests that will trigger a recount because of that 0.5% threshold. If we went back and applied that 0.5% threshold to 2020, there would have been 5 separate contests that automatically triggered a recount. So we're looking at that December 5th, the Secretary of State would do their canvass, then the Secretary of State as well as the county will have to go to court and ask the court to order that recount to be initiated. Then on the December 6th, we'll have to go through a complete new logic and accuracy test, both at the county level as well as the Secretary of State level. Because Maricopa County is the largest county in the state, we represent about 62% of the ballots that will be voted in this election. We've worked with the Secretary of State that will start our recount because it'll just take us longer to go through that recount process. And then they'll have to go to every one of the other 14 counties in those days after December 6th. So we anticipate that could take them till December 13th for them to complete their logic and accuracy tests. And then we'll be doing our recount and hand count from December 7th to the 23rd of December. And then we'll be in court that week after Christmas. So that's the timeline that we expect for the recount. Can we go to the next slide? So, but the recount process itself will be, well, in some ways very similar to when we're tabulating ballots through the normal election process. In some ways it's slightly different. So we maintain the same level of security, bipartisan representation throughout. Observers are throughout the process. We'll continue all of our chain of custody records. Have to create new logs, but we're referencing back to the old logs. We're doing daily reconciliations to make sure the number of ballots are tracking and matching. But we will not be creating daily releases of results. So if you go back to the normal election tabulation process, once we get to November 8th, that 8 p.m. post, every single day would be posting election results and updating those results. State statute does not allow for that to occur with a recount. So all of those results are going to be under seal. We won't even be running those results reports until we get ready and we've completed the recount process. And then all of those will be sealed and wait for the judge who will then open those results in court, and then those will be the final results. But there is one other step to this process, and it is another hand count. And this is 2% of the total ballots within the contests that are being recounted. So there will be that hand count process that will be occurring as well. So we can go to the next slide. I think with that, we can open it up to any questions. And I think we have 6 minutes for questions.
Hi, Scott. We do have a few questions in the chat. Carol asked about early ballots, and she said, when early ballots are cast in person at vote centers, are they counted at the voting location or back at MCTEC when they're brought back to the elections department?
So great question. So if they're either, an early ballot could either be dropped off or voted in person, right? And someone get issued a ballot, that ballot's going to go into what we call a counter envelope. So it's a white envelope, that voter signs it, gets sealed, gets put into a drop box there, or a early ballot drop box, along with any green affidavit envelopes that were dropped off. We send those bipartisan courier teams, Republican and Democrat, then break the seals on those drop boxes, remove those ballots, put them into a transport container that then gets affixed with tamper evident seals as well. All of that gets signed, the time and date that those couriers were there. And then they come back to the Maricopa County Elections Center here. And then that's when we'll go through an audit process and count the number of ballots that were transported. But the chain of custody is maintained through those tamper evident seals, and that we had bipartisan representation throughout that entire process.
Thanks, Scott. We have another question from Irene, and she is wondering about write-in candidates for Election Day. So her question is, since Election Day ballots are tabulated at the voting location, how are write-in candidates counted for ballots cast on Election Day?
Yeah, that's great question. So our central count tabulators and our precinct-based tabulators aren't able to read that handwriting. So when those results come back to us, right, those ballots will be transported in those black canvas bags. The results will be recorded on those memory cards. Those memory cards then load in all the results from Election Day. We'll be loading them through the night on election night. However, we're also taking those images that come back that those tabulators took. And then we'll have to have our electronic adjudication boards go through, and it usually happens on the Saturday or Sunday after Election Day, that we'll have those bipartisan adjudication boards going through and then tallying those results using the adjudication system for those Election Day ballots as well. Again, they'll be looking at the ballot itself, they'll be logging, and they're just looking at this point in time for the write-in candidates and those official, whether they can say, yep, this is an official write-in, or no, they were a not qualified write-in. And then they're logging all of that on manual logs. And then before any of those results get loaded into the system, we run that system generated report, and there's a reconciliation that occurs to make sure that those adjudication boards, every action they took matches their manual log.
Thanks, Scott. I have one final question for you. The question is, does the election department call races?
So no, we do not, right? And usually it could happen even on election night sometimes, but those are the media outlets that would be calling the races. What the elections department does is we count votes, we then audit those votes, and then we go through what is called a canvass process, right? So we're making sure that every single ballot that was submitted to us, should it be counted or shouldn't it be counted? And the shouldn't be would be like if it's a provisional ballot, and maybe that voter registered after the registration deadline. But we have to make sure that maybe that registration card wasn't submitted to us right before the election deadline for them to be able to register to vote. So we go through that audit process. We produce many, many different reports as part of the canvas. That'll be summary level reports, very detailed level reports at the precinct level. We make sure that every one of those items reconcile. And we produce a canvas report that goes to the Board of Supervisors that gets certified. And then that goes on to the Secretary of State that also gets certified. So that's what our role is to count those results, produce those official canvases, but we do not call races. So
thank you so much, Scott. Thank you, Megan, for fielding those questions. And that concludes our fourth and final virtual workshop for the year. And we do hope that you found the information beneficial. We are going to come back next year with lots more virtual workshops for you. But in the meantime, I want to remind you that you can view all of our virtual workshops, our seminars, our election connection short videos, and of course, our fill the ballot videos anytime by going to youtube.com/Maricopa Vote. And also to encourage you to go to our website, elections.maricopa.gov. Remember, there you can see your personalized dashboard, BAllotReady.vote. That's where you can track your ballot. So we do encourage you to go there. And remember, if you want to stay informed, we're going to continue with our Just the Facts monthly newsletter. You can subscribe to justthefacts.vote. Again, I had mentioned the website. If you want to find a vote center near you, go to locations.maricopa.gov. And of course, you can stay in touch. You have our phone number there and you can email us anytime. We're on all social media platforms. And I'd like to end by saying your feedback is really important to us. We'd like to hear from you. So I'm going to send you an email with a feedback card. And if you could just take a moment, fill that out, submit it back to us. Let us know how we're doing. We really appreciate that. And so from all of us at Maricopa County Elections Department, thank you for attending and have a great day.